Hi folks, welcome to Just Roots Make Your Own Kimchi Workshop. This workshop will be under 15 minutes and will jam in all the supplies, vegetables, spices, and knowledge you'll need to make your own kimchi at home. Maybe you've never heard of kimchi or tried it before. Kimchi is a traditional Korean dish consisting of salted and fermented vegetables. Kimchi most traditionally features Napa cabbage and Korean daikon radish, and seasonings like Korean chili powder, green onions, garlic, ginger, and salted seafood such as fish sauce or dried shrimp. Kimchi is a staple food in Korean cuisine and is considered a type of banchan. Banchan are small dishes served in small portions alongside rice. Kimchi enhances the shelf life of vegetables, especially winter storage veggies, and traditionally people stored this ferment in large earthenware vessels in the ground to prevent freezing during the winter months. Don't be afraid of the fermentation process. It's actually really easy. Just let the microorganisms do the work. Kimchi is typically fermented by wild cultures, naturally present on vegetables. The bacteria that are responsible for this type of fermentation are available everywhere. They're on vegetable skins, in the air, on your hands. Its abundance explains why fermented foods are used in so many different cultures. For those who want to know the science behind it, here's a quick peek. The process that turns vegetables into kimchi is called lactofermentation. This is a transformative process where lactic acid bacteria, let's call them LAB for short, metabolize the carbohydrates, such as sugar, in vegetables into lactic acid, which gives fermented foods their sour flavor and increases their acidity, making them safe to eat. So most lacto-fermented veggies are going to start by being submerged in brine. And this is because many harmful pathogens don't like salinity. Labs are also anaerobic, which means they don't like or need oxygen to survive. By submerging the veggies in brine, we get rid of all the wild, oxygen-loving pathogens that may spoil the food, making it moldy or unsafe to eat. So that's why it's different from when your food is rotting or molding. This is a different process. And this is also why you want to make sure when you make your kimchi, it's totally covered in the brine. Besides the lactic acid, carbon dioxide, CO2, is also an exciting byproduct of lab. CO2 makes kimchi fizz when you open a jar for the first time, and it adds a kick to the taste. This is a good sign. This is a sign of life. Carbon dioxide, though, can also build pressure in your kimchi jar, and that's why it's important either to burp your kimchi once in a while, a couple times a day, or just slightly screw the lid on. We'll show you that. The kimchi fermentation process is short in comparison to, making sauerkraut, if you've done that before. Really, all you have to do is chop, mix, and let it sit. Making kimchi doesn't have to be exact. Feel free to stray from the recipe we're using and experiment with different seasonings or vegetables. Once you've made your kimchi, there are endless possibilities to use it. We'll include some recipes and links to them in the video description below here. Now let's go ahead and look at what supplies and ingredients we'll be using. So for materials, we'll need a cutting board and knife, of course. A vegetable peeler is optional if you preferred peeled vegetables. A 64-ounce mason jar with lid, or a few smaller ones. It depends on the size of your Napa cabbage, and you'll have to use your eyes to judge that. I like to use some parchment paper to line in between my mason jar lid and the glass because the ferment can react with metal, and that's why we use mason jars. The parchment paper really helps. A large bowl for mixing, so we're going to be massaging salt into your cabbage, and you really are going to want to have a lot of space to do that. A colander for rinsing that salt off the cabbage. Sea salt, pickling, or kosher are great substitutes, but not iodized salt. Again, we don't want to meddle with this natural process. Korean or any chili pepper flake is going to work. I'm going to use Thai chili peppers. If you have, any other red pepper flake, go ahead and use that at home. And fish sauce is another optional ingredient. I like to use fish sauce because it adds a wonderful umami flavor. For the veggies, the staples are Napa cabbage and Korean daikon radish. Now you can use regular cabbage or bok choy if you don't have Napa, and you can also use just any other radish or daikon plus another type of radish. You also need scallions, garlic, and ginger. I don't have fresh ginger today, so I'm going to use dry and powdered ginger, but I think fresh ginger is preferred. Now we can get creative. In our November CSA share, we had rutabaga, celeriac, which will bring a mild sweet flavor, turnips, which will bring a bitter acidic flavor, carrots. So mine are soft and they're not too exciting, but they're going to fare great in our kimchi. So go ahead and use your wilty vegetables in this. Beets make a really interesting kimchi. I would save it for your second batch. Try it with just the staples first and see how it goes. Beets are complex. Leeks would go great with beet kimchi or maybe wild ramps. Try them all. Without further ado, let's begin our kimchi demo. So I'm going to start off here with one medium Napa cabbage. I peeled the outer leaves off. And I'm going to start by cutting that Napa cabbage directly in half vertically. And then again in half vertically. Then I'm going to turn it horizontally and just slice it with pretty thick slices. You can see those are kind of large. I'm going to leave the butt end out where the roots were just because it's a little bit tough. I'm going to do that to the whole cabbage and put it into a large bowl, something that we can massage and salt. I'm going to really liberally sprinkle salt on there. The job of the salt is to draw water out of the cabbage itself. We're going to rinse it off quite well later, so go ahead and really get that on there and then use your hands to massage it in. I chose to peel my daikon radish just because the outside wasn't looking so hot. And once you have that daikon peeled, if you do decide to do that, I'm going to slice it into pretty big chunks. I want different textures, different sizes. The daikon might be able to stay a little bit crunchy if you make bigger slices. So you can see what I'm doing there, sliced into rounds and then into thirds. And those are pretty thick slices. We'll toss those into a bowl along with the rest of our vegetables. We're going to keep these separate. Now to get the root hairs off the celeriac, I use a knife and I get the big thick stuff and then I follow up with a vegetable peeler. I really love adding celeriac to this dish. I cut off the end, the root end, and then I'm dicing them into a little bit smaller diced pieces than the radish. I'm doubling up on radish because I love radish. I'm using a watermelon radish and I'm going to get some color out of that. You don't have to use everything I showed you from before. If you're not a huge radish fan, you can skip it. I wouldn't skip the carrots though. They're really delicious in kimchi. I'm matchsticking or julienning my carrots, so I'm going to cut them into slices and then cut them into matchsticks like that. Next up is the scallions. So I cut off the roots first and then I cut them all at once into little chunks. We're going to use all of the leaf here, so it's not just the bottom white part, we're going to use all of it. Then we're going to cut up some garlic, so I'm going to use a whole small head, which turned out to be 5 or 6 cloves. I'm going to press the garlic outside of so it can come out of its skin. And then I'm going to use a food processor for the next part. So we're going to food process a little paste together, and that paste will go with your vegetables. Optional, I did just under a 1/4 cup of fish sauce. That's all I had left. You could do up to a full 1/4 cup. And because I didn't have fresh ginger, I used a 1.5 teaspoons of dried ginger. Depending on your preference, you can use up to a 1/4 cup of your red pepper flakes. And just be careful, it's going to smell really intense. It might make you cough when you blend that up. If it's really dry, you can add a little more water, but you really should try not to if you don't have to. I just added that to the bowl of the vegetables that are not the Napa cabbage. I'm using a little bit of parchment paper here to separate the metal lid from the glass jar. This is also going to let some of the air out because it won't be sealed as tight, so you might not have to burp it as much. Okay, so now your cabbage has been sitting for 30 minutes to an hour with that salt water. You're going to want to wash the heck out of it and get as much salt out as possible, gently squeezing it, strain it, and then add it to a bowl with your paste and your vegetables. Give this a really good stir. If you have gloves, you can use your hands and really massage the paste into the vegetables. If not, a wooden spoon will be just fine. I like to use a canning funnel to help me get all the kimchi into the jar. That's kind of one of the more messy processes. And I started off with this spoon, which was a bad idea, and I quickly switched to some tongs. My bowl's a little bit heavy to carry, so I had to do it this way. You do want all the liquid from the bottom of that bowl in your jar. And yes, the kimchi is going to make more liquid on its own as the vegetables interact with the salt, but we do want to preserve the liquid that we have now. You may occasionally have to push the kimchi down into the jar further to fit it all, but it will fit, and the tighter the pack is, the better. We want that liquid to come out and all the vegetables to be submerged in the brine. All right, now that your jar is full, you're really going to want to push that kimchi down so it's submerged in the brine. Now, don't panic if you don't have enough brine yet to cover the top. Within an hour or two, you will, because the kimchi will start to sweat more. But just keep that in mind, that you're going to want to push it down so nothing can develop mold. We want anaerobic fermentation happening here under that brine, and salinity helps keep this food safe. Okay, so push it down, and then really you're just going to put a lid on it. You can use your parchment paper. We're going to let it sit for 3 to 4 days before opening it up and tasting it. One important thing to note is either you can screw it on loosely or tightly, but if you do tightly, you're going to need to burp it. I'd say burp it, 2 to 3 times a day, which means just take the lid off. Just to be very clear, we're going to leave the kimchi at room temperature on your counter until you finish fermenting it. That's up to you. Maybe it's 3 days, maybe it's 4, maybe it's 7. You're going to try your kimchi, and once you're ready and you found the taste you like, then you'll put it in the fridge, which halts the fermentation process, really slows it down because of the cold temperature. Okay, folks, so just under 24 hours have passed. I just want to take a look at what's happening with our kimchi. So for starters, our brine, which was probably down to here when I first put the kimchi in, is now all the way up to the top of the kimchi. You see that there's still some little bits and pieces poking out at the top, so my job today is going to be push those down under the brine. I also, quote, burped my kimchi by taking the top off, so that's going to get rid of some of that excess carbon dioxide. And we're going to keep doing that, maybe a couple times a day. As the kimchi starts to ferment more and more, you're going to need to burp it more and more. So here we go. You can probably already start to see the bubbles. That's the carbon dioxide in there. That's good sign. That means our fermentation is happening. So I'm just pushing these down. Then we'll close it up again and check it in a few hours, let it burp. And once we're at about 4 days, 3 or 4 days, you can give it a taste, see how it's tasting to you. If you want it a little bit funkier, you can keep it going. I'd say maybe up to 7 days. But when you're ready, you can just stick it in the fridge. There you have it.